The docking clamps engaged with a metallic thud that echoed through the lower bay of Razor's Edge Station. Maintenance crews glanced up from their work, expecting another trader vessel or perhaps a small cargo hauler. What they saw instead made several of them pause mid-step. The ship was unremarkable. A basic model civilian transport, the kind anyone could purchase at a dozen ports across the sector. No weapons arrays. No reinforced plating. No military markings or corporate logos. Just plain gray metal that had seen better days, scarred by countless jumps through space. The airlock hissed open. Laura Bennett stepped onto the station wearing clothes that made the security officer monitoring the feed do a double take. She wore a simple brown jacket over a black shirt, worn boots that had walked across more worlds than most ships had visited, and plain work pants with several pockets. No armor. No helmet. No visible weapons of any kind. She looked like someone who had just stepped off a farming colony, not someone arriving at the most dangerous mercenary hub in 3 sectors. The security officer, a Krell named Sherrick, leaned forward in his chair. His species had evolved as pack hunters on a world where everything tried to kill everything else. His people had been hunting and fighting for thousands of years before they ever reached the stars. He had trained himself to assess threats in milliseconds, a skill that had kept him alive through 2 wars and countless station brawls. Every instinct he possessed screamed at him that the woman on his screen was dangerous. He could not explain why. She was not large or heavily muscled. She carried nothing that could be identified as a weapon. Her movements were calm and unhurried as she walked down the ramp from her ship. Yet something about the way she moved, the way she held herself, made his spine tingle with warning signals his ancestors had relied on for survival. Sherrick activated his comm unit. All security teams, we have a situation in Lower Bay 7. His second-in-command, a younger Krell named Vorth, appeared on the screen. What kind of situation? Smugglers? Pirates? Just get down there. And bring the full team. In the lower bay, the maintenance crews had already begun backing away from Laura's ship. Not running, not fleeing, but moving with the careful deliberation of prey animals who had spotted a predator and were trying not to trigger a chase response. A Vaxian dockworker, his species descended from great cats that had ruled their world's jungles, found himself pressed against the far wall of the bay without remembering how he had gotten there. His ears were flat against his skull and his tail was tucked low. Submission postures. Safety postures. Laura noticed none of this, or if she did, she gave no sign. She simply walked across the bay floor toward the main corridor that led deeper into the station. Her pace was steady and even, neither fast nor slow. Just constant. Like something that had all the time in the world. By the time Sherrick and his security team arrived at the bay, Laura had already reached the corridor entrance. The Krell security chief had brought 5 of his best warriors, all of them armed and armored, all of them experienced fighters who had faced down smugglers, pirates, and drunk mercenaries without flinching. All 5 of them stopped the moment they saw her. Sherrick had fought in close combat. He had hunted dangerous prey on a dozen worlds. He had stared down enemy soldiers and never blinked. But when Laura Bennett turned to face him, something in his genetic memory, something buried deep in the survival instincts of his species, told him to be very, very careful. She met his eyes. Her gaze was steady and calm, showing neither fear nor aggression. Just patience. The infinite patience of something that could wait as long as necessary. I need to speak with your station commander, Laura said. Her voice was quiet and even, with no hint of threat or demand. Just a simple statement of fact. Sherrick found his hand moving toward his weapon, a purely instinctive response. He stopped himself, uncertain why he had even reacted. The woman had done nothing threatening. She had not moved toward him, had not raised her voice, had not shown any sign of hostility. Yet every fiber of his being wanted to either fight or flee. The commander is busy, Sherrick managed to say, his voice rougher than he intended. Laura nodded as if this was exactly what she had expected. I can wait. She moved to the side of the corridor and leaned against the wall, settling into a relaxed posture that suggested she could stand there for hours if necessary. Days even. However long it took. One of the younger Krell in the security team, a warrior named Gresh who had only been on the station for 3 months, took a step forward. We need to search you for weapons, he said, trying to sound authoritative. Before Sherrick could stop him, before anyone could react, Gresh moved toward Laura with his scanning device raised. Laura did not move. She simply looked at him. Gresh froze mid-step. His scanning device dropped from suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering on the metal floor. He backed away, his breathing rapid and shallow, his pupils dilated with an ancient fear he could not name. Sherrick grabbed the younger Krell by the shoulder and pulled him back to the group. "Stay here," he ordered his team. Then, keeping his movements slow and deliberate, he activated his comm unit and called the station commander directly. On the command deck 3 levels above, Throck was reviewing supply manifests when the call came through. The Gorvian commander had 4 arms, each one strong enough to bend steel bars, and a body that had been engineered by evolution to dominate his homeworld's deadly environment. He had commanded 3 warships before taking this station posting, and he did not appreciate interruptions during his administrative work. "This had better be important," Throck said, not looking up from his screens. "Sir, there is a human in Lower Bay 7. She arrived alone, unarmed, and every predator species on this station is reacting to her presence." Throck stopped reading. "Reacting how?" "Avoidance behaviors. Submission postures. Sir, I have fought in 3 campaigns and hunted on 7 worlds. I have never been afraid of anything that was not actively trying to kill me. But this human..." Sherrick paused, choosing his words carefully. "She is dangerous and I cannot explain why." Throck brought up the security feed on his main display. He saw Laura standing calmly in the corridor, waiting patiently while 6 armed Krell security officers maintained a cautious distance from her. The commander zoomed in on her face, studying her features for any sign of threat or deception. What he saw was simply a human woman who looked tired and determined. Nothing more. Yet as he watched her, as he observed the way she stood with perfect stillness, the way her eyes tracked movement without moving her head, the way she radiated a sense of infinite patience, Throck felt something he had not experienced in many years. Recognition. Not of the individual, but of what she represented. He had seen that same patient stillness in the great hunters of his own world, the creatures that tracked their prey across continents, following for days or weeks until exhaustion claimed their target. "Let her through," Throck said quietly. "Send her up to command. And Sherrick? Do not try to stop her. Something tells me that would be unwise." Laura pushed off from the wall and began walking toward the lift. The command deck of Razor's Edge Station occupied the highest level of the central tower, offering a view of the entire facility through reinforced windows. Throck stood with his back to these windows, his 4 arms crossed in a posture that usually intimidated visitors. He had learned long ago that size and strength could end most confrontations before they began. Laura Bennett stepped off the lift and walked into the command center as if she had been invited for tea. She looked around the room once, taking in the tactical displays, the security feeds, and the 3 armed guards positioned at strategic points. Then she looked directly at Throck and waited. The Gorvian commander studied her in silence. She was shorter than him by at least 2 feet. She possessed only 2 arms instead of his 4. She wore no armor while he was encased in reinforced plating. By every measure that mattered in combat, he should have been the dominant presence in this room. Yet somehow he was not. "You are causing problems on my station," Throck said finally. "My security teams are reporting unusual behavior from every predator species in the lower levels. They claim your presence is disturbing them." "I am not trying to disturb anyone," Laura replied. Her tone was polite and factual, without any hint of apology or concern. "I am simply looking for someone." "What technology are you using?" Laura raised an eyebrow. "Technology? My people have sensors that can detect pheromone manipulation, sonic frequencies beyond normal hearing ranges, and even quantum field disruptions. You must be using something that triggers fear responses in hunters." "What is it?" Laura shook her head slowly. "I'm not using any technology. What your people are sensing is simply recognition." Throck's primary arms uncrossed. "Explain." "Your guards are Krell, correct? Pack hunters from a high-gravity world where everything competed for survival." "Yes." "Then their instincts are well developed. They know how to identify threats, how to assess danger, how to recognize other predators." Laura moved to one of the windows and looked out at the station below. "When they look at me, those instincts tell them what I am. What all humans are. And what is that? Persistence hunters. We are the species that never stops." Throck walked to stand beside her at the window. Below them, the station's main market level bustled with activity. Dozens of species moved through the crowds, trading goods, hiring mercenaries, conducting the business that kept Razor's Edge profitable. Among them, Throck could now see what Sherrick had reported. Whenever a human moved through the crowd, the predator species gave them space. Not obvious avoidance, nothing that would draw attention, but a subtle shift in the flow of traffic. "You are saying my people fear humans because you hunt through endurance?" Throck asked. "That seems unlikely. The Krell are faster than humans. Stronger. Better armed. In a short fight, yes, Laura agreed. But hunting is not about short fights. It is about long pursuits. My species evolved on a world where we could not outrun our prey and could not overpower it with strength. So we developed a different method. She turned from the window to face Throck directly. We followed our prey. 4 hours. 4 days. For as long as it took. We tracked animals across open grasslands under a burning sun, and we never stopped. The prey would run, would flee, would try to escape. But we just kept walking. Kept following. Kept coming. The prey would rest, Laura continued. It would stop to catch its breath, to drink water, to find shelter from the heat. And while it rested, we would catch up. Then it would run again and we would follow again. Over and over until the prey's body gave out from exhaustion and stress. Then we would take it down. Throck listened in silence, his tactical mind processing this information. Your Krell evolved as ambush hunters, Laura said. They learned to recognize other ambush hunters, other species that would compete for the same prey or territory. But they also learned to recognize something else. Something that would never give up, never stop tracking them, never let them rest. That kind of hunter is different. More dangerous in some ways because you cannot escape it through speed or strength. You can only escape it by outlasting it, and humans do not get outlasted. This is instinct? Throck asked. They sense this without understanding it? Yes. Just like how you can sense when someone is watching you, even when you cannot see them. Just like how prey animals know when a predator is near. It is information that evolution has written into the survival instincts of every species that had to avoid being hunted. Throck walked to one of the security displays and brought up a feed from the lower market levels. He watched as a group of HRRN warriors, each one a trained killer from a species known for their pack tactics and vicious combat skills, moved aside to let a single human woman walk past. The woman was old, her hair gray, her movements slow. She carried shopping bags and posed no obvious threat. Yet the HRRN gave her space. I have never noticed this before, Throck admitted. Most species do not realize they are doing it, Laura said. It is subtle. A few extra steps to the side. A decision to take a different corridor. Small choices that seem random but follow a pattern. Your conscious mind invents reasons for these choices, but the real reason is buried deeper. She moved to another display and pointed to a different feed. This one showed the station's notorious mercenary quarter, where fighters from across the galaxy gathered to drink, boast, and occasionally brawl. In one corner of the screen, a human man sat alone at a table. The tables around him were empty, even though the rest of the bar was crowded. He is not even trying to be intimidating, Laura observed. He is just sitting there, drinking something and reading a data pad. But look at the space around him. Even drunk mercenaries who fight each other over insults are giving him distance. Throck enlarged the image. The human in question was middle-aged and slightly overweight, wearing civilian clothes and showing no weapons. Nothing about his appearance suggested danger. Yet a circle of empty space surrounded his table like an invisible barrier. I want to test something, Throck said suddenly. He activated his comm unit. Security, bring up the holding cells on screen 4. A new display activated, showing the station's detention area. Several cells were occupied by various offenders awaiting transport or trial. In one cell, a Vaxian sat on the floor, his feline features twisted in anger. The Vaxian were known for their temper and their pride, traits that often landed them in trouble on stations like this. That one was arrested for assault 3 hours ago, Throck explained. He attacked a merchant over a pricing dispute. My guards had to stun him twice to subdue him. Throck spoke into the comm, bring the human female from command down to the detention level. Let her walk past the cells. Laura looked at him with mild curiosity but said nothing. A few minutes later, she was escorted down to the lower levels by 2 guards who maintained a careful distance from her. The security feed showed her approaching the row of cells. The moment the Vaxian prisoner saw her, his aggressive posturing stopped. His ears flattened against his skull. His tail, which had been lashing with fury, tucked low and still. He moved to the back of his cell and crouched there, his eyes fixed on Laura as she walked calmly past. She did not look at him, did not speak, did not even slow her pace. She just walked by, and the Vaxian remained frozen in his submissive posture until she was out of sight. Throck watched this with fascination. Remarkable. He went from enraged to terrified in seconds. Not terrified, Laura corrected as she returned to the command deck. Cautious. His instincts recognized something his conscious mind does not understand. Something that tells him I am not prey, and engaging with me would be unwise. You said you were looking for someone? Throck said, changing the subject. Who? Laura's expression hardened slightly, the first change in her calm demeanor since arriving. A human named Victor Kane. He has been operating in this sector as a mercenary trainer. I have reason to believe he passed through this station. Throck accessed his records. We have no Victor Kane registered. He would not use his real name. Human male, late 30s, military build, probably traveling alone. The commander pulled up departure records from the past week. 17 human males had passed through the station in that time frame. He displayed their images on the main screen. Laura studied each face carefully, then pointed to one. That one. What name did he use? Martin Cross. He booked passage to Bloodmark 4 days ago. Laura nodded as if this was exactly what she had expected. Thank you for your help. She turned to leave, but Throck called after her. Bloodmark is a predator training world. The most dangerous fighters in the galaxy go there to test themselves. If this Victor Kane is there, he will be well protected. Laura paused at the lift entrance and looked back at the Gorvian commander. I know. I have been following him for 6 months across 9 systems. He knows I am coming. He knows I will not stop. And that knowledge is eating at him, making him tired, making him careless. You truly believe you can catch him through patience alone? I do not need to believe it, Laura said quietly. I just need to keep walking. Eventually he will have nowhere left to run. The lift doors closed and she was gone. Laura booked passage on a commercial transport called the Wandering Star, a mid-sized vessel that made regular runs to the outer colonies. Bloodmark was not a popular destination, but the ship would get her close enough. From there she could find another way to reach the predator training world. The transport carried 32 passengers, most of them traders and colonists heading to the frontier systems. Laura took a seat in the common area and settled in for the 3-day journey. She pulled out a worn data pad and began reviewing files, her expression calm and focused. The other passengers noticed her within the first hour. A Krell merchant named Thask was the first to change seats, moving from the chair directly across from Laura to one near the viewing port. When his traveling companion asked why, Thask could not provide a clear answer. He just felt more comfortable with some distance between himself and the human woman. By the second day, a clear pattern had emerged. The seats immediately around Laura remained empty, even though the transport was crowded and space was limited. Passengers would start to sit down near her, then pause, reconsider, and find somewhere else to settle. Laura appeared not to notice. She read her files, ate her meals, and occasionally gazed out the viewing port at the stars streaming past. She spoke to no one unless spoken to first, and even then her responses were brief and polite. On the 3rd day everything changed. The Wandering Star was halfway through an uninhabited system when the proximity alarms started blaring. Captain Morris, a veteran pilot who had been running these routes for 15 years, checked his sensors and cursed under his breath. 3 ships were approaching fast. Their configuration was unmistakable. Pirates. Morris activated the ship-wide communication system. All passengers, this is the captain. We have incoming hostiles. Move to the interior cabins and stay away from the outer walls. This is not a drill. The common area erupted in panic. Passengers grabbed their belongings and rushed toward the safer interior sections of the ship. Laura remained in her seat, calmly closing her data pad and tucking it into her jacket pocket. A young human man, probably no more than 20 years old, stopped beside her chair. We need to move. Did you not hear the captain? I heard, Laura said. She stood up slowly and followed the crowd toward the interior cabins, but her pace was unhurried, as if she had all the time in the world. The transport shuddered as the pirate ships matched velocity and began docking procedures. Captain Morris tried evasive maneuvers, but his ship was designed for cargo, not combat. Within minutes, the pirates had attached boarding tubes to 2 of the main airlocks. The passengers huddled in the interior cabins, listening to the sound of cutting torches working through the outer doors. Some prayed. Others wept quietly. A few brave souls armed themselves with whatever tools they could find, knowing such weapons would be useless against trained pirates. Laura sat on the floor with her back against the wall, her eyes closed and her breathing steady. The young human man who had warned her earlier crouched beside her, holding a pipe wrench with white-knuckled hands. Are you not scared? He whispered. Laura opened her eyes and looked at him. Fear does not change what is coming. It only wastes energy. The airlocks burst open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors. The pirates were HRN, a species known for their brutal efficiency and complete lack of mercy. They traveled in packs, took what they wanted, and killed anyone who resisted. The lead pirate, a massive warrior named Krieg, kicked open the door to the interior cabin where the passengers waited. He stood in the doorway, his armor scarred from countless fights, his weapons drawn and ready. Behind him, 6 more HRN warriors spread out to cover the room. "Everyone on the floor now?" Krieg roared. His translator made his voice sound even more menacing, a deep growl that promised violence. The passengers complied immediately, pressing themselves flat against the metal floor. Everyone except Laura. She simply sat with her back against the wall, watching the pirates with mild interest. Krieg noticed her immediately. Something about her stillness drew his attention like a beacon. He took a step into the room, his weapon raised, ready to make an example of this defiant human. Then he stopped. His pack members behind him noticed the hesitation. One of them, a younger warrior named Shas, moved forward to see what had caught their leader's attention. Laura met Krieg's eyes. She did not move, did not speak, did not show any sign of fear or aggression. She just looked at him with that same patient, steady gaze that had unnerved the Krell security officers on Razor's Edge Station. Krieg felt something he had not experienced in years. His genetic memory, the deep instincts that had kept his ancestors alive on their brutal homeworld, suddenly screamed a warning. This was not prey. This was not even a rival predator competing for territory. This was something else. Something that hunted differently. The HRN had evolved as pack hunters who coordinated attacks and overwhelmed their prey with numbers and ferocity. They understood ambush tactics and direct combat. But they also understood pursuit, and their instincts could recognize when something was pursuing them. Laura had not moved, had not threatened, had not even stood up. But every fiber of Krieg's being told him that this human was tracking something, following something, hunting something with a patience that bordered on supernatural. And if he became her target, she would never stop. Shas moved beside his pack leader. Just one human female. Should we? No, Krieg said sharply. He backed toward the door, keeping his eyes on Laura. We are leaving. But the cargo? I said we are leaving. Krieg's voice carried a note of panic that his pack had never heard before. The other HRN warriors looked at each other in confusion but followed their leader back toward the airlocks. One of the younger pirates, emboldened by confusion and youth, raised his weapon toward Laura. We cannot let them think we are weak. We should. Krieg struck him across the face with the back of his hand, hard enough to send the younger HRN sprawling. Do not look at her. Do not think about her. We are leaving this ship now. The pirate pack retreated through the corridors, moving faster than they had entered. The passengers in the cabin heard the airlocks disengage, felt the transport shudder as the boarding tubes disconnected. Within minutes, the pirate ships were accelerating away at maximum speed. Silence filled the cabin. Captain Morris's voice came over the intercom, shaking with disbelief. They are gone. I do not understand it, but they are gone. The passengers slowly got to their feet, looking at each other in confusion and relief. Several of them turned to look at Laura, who had finally stood up and was brushing dust from her pants. The young human man with the pipe wrench stared at her. What just happened? Why did they leave? They recognized what I am, Laura said simply. She walked toward the door, heading back to the common area. And what are you? Laura paused in the doorway and glanced back at him. Someone who is following someone else. The pirates understood that if they stayed, if they drew my attention, I might start following them instead. They made the smart choice. She left the cabin, leaving the young man and the other passengers to process what had just occurred. Captain Morris found her an hour later, sitting in her original seat in the common area as if nothing had happened. I have been running these routes for 15 years, he said. I have been boarded 7 times. The pirates always take cargo, always take valuables, always leave us stripped bare. But today they ran. I need to know why. They sensed a bigger threat, Laura explained. Pirates are predators, but they are practical ones. They calculate risk versus reward. When they looked at me, their instincts told them the risk was too high. But you did nothing. You just sat there. Exactly. I was patient. I was calm. I showed no fear and no aggression. To a predator, that behavior has only one explanation. I am hunting something and I am willing to wait as long as necessary to catch it. The pirates understood that if they interfered with my hunt, they might become my new target. And they know that humans do not give up. Morris shook his head in amazement. Who are you hunting that inspires such caution? A man named Victor Kane. He has killed innocent people and dishonored my species. I have been following him for 6 months, and I will continue following him until I bring him home to face justice. And if he runs? Laura's expression did not change. Then I will follow. It does not matter where he goes or how fast he runs. I have time. I have patience. And eventually his body will fail him before mine fails me. That is how persistence hunting works. The captain left her alone after that, returning to his duties with a new understanding of why the predator species in the galaxy gave humans such careful respect. Laura pulled out her data pad and resumed reading her files. Victor Kane's last known location was Bloodmark. She had his trail. She had his pattern. She knew where he would go and what he would do. And she would keep walking until she found him. The transport continued its journey through the stars, carrying a passenger who had become a legend without saying a word. Behind her, the pirate pack was already spreading stories across their communication networks. Stories about a human who hunted with nothing but patience, who needed no weapons because time itself was her greatest tool. Victor Kane would hear these stories soon. He would know she was still coming. And that knowledge would make him tired, would make him afraid, would make him careless. Laura allowed herself a small smile. The hunt was proceeding exactly as planned. Bloodmark lived up to its name. The planet's surface was stained red from iron-rich soil and the countless battles that had been fought across its harsh terrain. It was a world where predator species sent their warriors to train, to test themselves against the deadliest environments and creatures the galaxy had to offer. Laura stepped off the transport shuttle onto the landing platform and immediately felt the oppressive heat. The air was thick and heavy, making each breath feel like work. The gravity was higher than Earth's standard, enough to make movement exhausting for most species. Perfect conditions for testing endurance and strength. The training complex sprawled across several square miles of rugged landscape. Obstacle courses, combat arenas, hunting grounds, and survival zones, all designed to push warriors to their absolute limits. Instructors from a dozen predator species worked here, teaching tactics and techniques that had been refined over thousands of years of evolution. Victor Kane had been working here for 3 weeks, teaching human combat methods to alien students who paid premium rates for his expertise. He had chosen Bloodmark specifically because it was remote, heavily defended, and populated entirely by warriors who would not ask questions about his past. He thought he was safe here. Laura walked through the main gate of the training complex without announcing herself. The Krell guard at the entrance watched her approach, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. But he did not draw it. Instead, he stepped aside and let her pass, his instincts overriding his training. She moved through the facility like water flowing downhill, taking the path of least resistance but never deviating from her direction. Warriors training in the open areas paused to watch her pass. Some recognized the pattern immediately, the steady pace and patient demeanor that marked her as a persistence hunter. Others simply felt uneasy without understanding why. Victor Kane was in the middle of a training session when word reached him. One of his Vaxian students, a young warrior named Kess, came running up to the combat ring where Kane was demonstrating close-quarters techniques. "Instructor Kane, there is a human female entering the facility. She is asking about you." Kane's blood went cold. He had known this moment would come eventually, but he had hoped for more time. 6 months of running, of changing names, of covering his tracks. 6 months of looking over his shoulder and sleeping with one eye open. "What does she look like?" Kane asked, though he already knew the answer. "Brown jacket, simple clothes, no weapons. She just walks slowly and stares at people. Everyone is avoiding her." It was Laura Bennett. It had to be. Kane dismissed his class immediately and grabbed his gear. He had prepared for this, had planned escape routes and emergency protocols. Bloodmark had hundreds of miles of wilderness where a skilled soldier could disappear. He was faster than her, stronger than her, and he knew this terrain. He could lose her in the wilds and find another way off-world. Kane left through the facility's eastern gate, moving at a steady jog toward the mountain range that dominated the horizon. The terrain was brutal, filled with sharp rocks, steep cliffs, and predators that could kill an unwary traveler in seconds. But Kane was not unwary. He was a trained soldier who had survived combat on a dozen worlds. He could handle this. Laura reached the combat ring 10 minutes after Kane had fled. The Vaxian students were still there, looking confused and uncertain. She approached Kess, who instinctively backed away. "Which direction did he go?" Laura asked. Kess pointed toward the eastern gate with a trembling hand. Laura nodded her thanks and began walking in that direction. Not running. Not hurrying. Just walking with that same steady, inevitable pace. Kane ran for 3 hours straight, pushing himself hard across the rocky terrain. He climbed ridges, crossed ravines, and used every trick he knew to obscure his trail. He moved through water to hide his scent, doubled back on his own path to confuse trackers, and chose routes that would be difficult to follow. By the time the sun began to set, he had covered nearly 20 miles. He was exhausted, his muscles burning and his lungs aching from the thin air at high altitude. But he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. No one could have kept up with that pace. He found a sheltered spot between two large boulders and settled in to rest. He would sleep for a few hours, then move again before dawn. With enough distance, he could circle back to one of the other settlements and find transport off-world. Kane pulled out his canteen and drank deeply, letting the cool water soothe his parched throat. He chewed on a ration bar and tried to calm his racing heart. He had done it. He had escaped. Then he heard it. The soft crunch of boots on gravel. Kane froze, his hand moving to the knife at his belt. He peered around the boulder, expecting to see a blood-marked predator or perhaps a training patrol. What he saw instead made his stomach drop. Laura Bennett was walking along the trail he had taken, her pace unchanged from when she had started. She was not running. She was not tracking frantically or searching desperately. She was just walking, following his path with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world. Kane scrambled out of his hiding spot and ran. His brief rest had not been enough, and his muscles protested immediately, but fear gave him strength. He sprinted up the mountainside, taking a steeper route that would be harder to follow. Behind him, Laura maintained her steady walk. The pursuit continued through the night. Kane ran until his legs felt like rubber, then forced himself to keep running. He climbed sheer cliffs, waded through icy streams, and pushed his body beyond what he thought possible. Laura just kept walking. Dawn broke over the mountains, painting the red rocks in shades of orange and gold. Kane had not slept. He had barely stopped moving for 12 hours. His hands shook from exhaustion and his vision blurred at the edges. He had covered nearly 40 miles of brutal terrain. He looked back down the mountain trail and saw her. Still walking. Still coming. Never stopping. Kane tried to run again, but his body finally rebelled. His legs cramped, sending him stumbling to his knees. He forced himself back up and staggered forward, moving at little more than a fast walk now. The second day passed in a haze of exhaustion and fear. Kane knew he should stop, should rest, should let his body recover. But he could not. Every time he paused, he would see her in the distance, still walking, still following, getting closer with each step. By the third day, Kane was hallucinating. The lack of sleep and extreme physical exertion had pushed his mind to the breaking point. He saw things that were not there, heard sounds that did not exist. But through it all, one constant remained real. Laura Bennett, walking behind him, never stopping. Kane's communications device had been chirping for hours, but he had ignored it. Now, in a moment of desperate hope, he answered it. "Kane, this is Laura Bennett." Her voice was calm and clear, not even slightly winded. "You have been running for 3 days. You have covered over 90 miles. Your body is failing. How are you doing this?" Kane gasped, his own voice hoarse and broken. "How are you still coming?" "Because this is what humans do," Laura replied. "This is what we evolved to do. We do not need to be faster or stronger than our prey. We just need to be more patient. More persistent. We never stop." Kane looked behind him. She was closer now, maybe only a mile back. He could see her clearly in the morning light, still walking with that steady, measured pace that had not changed in 3 days. "I can keep running," Kane said, though even he did not believe it. "You can try," Laura said. "But your body has limits. You need water, food, sleep. I need those things too, but I pace myself. You are sprinting a marathon while I am walking it." The result was decided before we even started. Kane tried to run again. He made it 50 feet before his legs gave out completely. He fell hard, skinning his hands on the rough ground. He tried to stand but could not. His muscles simply would not respond anymore. He rolled onto his back, staring up at the alien sky, and waited. Laura appeared above him 30 minutes later. She was breathing slightly harder than normal, and there was dust on her clothes, but otherwise she looked like someone who had just finished a casual hike. She knelt beside him and pulled out a water bottle, holding it to his cracked lips. "Drink slowly." Kane drank, hating himself for accepting her help but too thirsty to refuse. "Why?" he asked when he could speak again. "Why follow me for 6 months? Why not just send soldiers or hire bounty hunters?" "Because you are human," Laura said simply. "You dishonored our species with your actions. You killed innocent people and made the galaxy fear us for the wrong reasons. I could not let that stand." She pulled out restraints and began securing his wrists. Kane was too exhausted to resist. "I thought I could outrun you," he said. "Everyone thinks that," Laura replied. But humans do not lose endurance contests. It is the one thing evolution gave us that nothing else in the galaxy can match. We are not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest. But we are the ones who never stop. She activated her communication device. This is Laura Bennett. I have Kane in custody. Sending coordinates for pickup. Kane closed his eyes, finally allowing himself to rest. The hunt was over. After 3 days of running and 6 months of fleeing, he had learned the hardest lesson any prey could learn. You cannot outrun something that will never stop following you. Laura sat beside him, calmly eating a ration bar and waiting for the transport that would take them both back to human space. She had walked for 3 days straight with minimal rest, had tracked him across impossible terrain, and had never once doubted that she would catch him. Because that is what humans do. They persist. They endure. They never give up. And the predators of the galaxy had finally learned to recognize that truth. The transport shuttle arrived 4 hours later, landing on a flat section of ground about half a mile from where Laura waited with her prisoner. Victor Kane had recovered enough to sit up, though his hands remained secured and his legs still trembled from exhaustion. He watched Laura with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. She had not gloated, had not lectured him about his crimes or threatened him with what awaited back home. She had simply sat quietly, occasionally offering him water or food, treating him with basic human dignity despite what he had done. "You really walked for 3 days straight?" Kane asked, breaking the silence. "I rested," Laura corrected. "Short breaks. Enough to keep my body functioning but not enough to lose ground. The key to persistence hunting is not to never rest. It is to rest less than your prey." "I was trained by Earth military," Kane said. "Special operations. I have completed missions on high-gravity worlds, survived behind enemy lines for weeks. I thought I was prepared for anything." "You were prepared for combat," Laura said. "But this was not combat. This was a hunt. Different skill set, different mindset. You kept thinking like a soldier trying to complete a mission. I thought like a hunter tracking prey." The shuttle touched down, kicking up clouds of red dust. 2 human security officers emerged, both wearing standard body armor and carrying weapons. They looked tough and professional, exactly the kind of people you would expect to transport a dangerous criminal. When they saw Laura still wearing her simple brown jacket and dusty boots, they both paused. One of them, a woman named Alice Grant, walked over and extended her hand. "You are Laura Bennett? The tracker." "I am," Laura confirmed, shaking her hand. "We have been hearing stories about you," Alice said. "Word has spread through the security networks. They say you tracked this man across 9 systems without ever losing his trail." 10 systems actually, Laura corrected. "He made a stop on Viridian Prime that most people do not know about." The security officers loaded Kane onto the shuttle, securing him in a reinforced holding cell. Laura followed them aboard, taking a seat near the viewing port. As the shuttle lifted off, she looked down at the red landscape of Bloodmark, already thinking about her next assignment. The journey back to human space took 6 days. During that time, word of Laura's capture spread through the galactic communication networks. The story was simple enough: a human tracker following a criminal for 6 months and finally catching him through sheer persistence. But the impact of that story was far more complex. On Razor's Edge Station, Commander Throck called a meeting with his security chiefs. He displayed footage of Laura's 3-day pursuit across Bloodmark, data that had been shared by the training facility's surveillance systems. "Watch her vitals," Throck said, pointing to the biometric data running alongside the video. "Her heart rate never spikes. Her breathing remains controlled. She maintains a pace that her body can sustain indefinitely. Meanwhile, look at Kane's readings. His heart rate is through the roof. His stress hormones are critical. His body is eating itself trying to maintain his speed." Sherrick, the Krell security chief, studied the data with professional interest. She turned his own fear against him. Every time he looked back and saw her still coming, his panic increased. His body flooded with stress chemicals that made him run faster but also exhausted him quicker. "Exactly," Throck agreed. "This is psychological warfare at its most basic level." She did not need to threaten him or hurt him. She just needed to be inevitable. To show him that no matter what he did, she would still be there, still following, still coming. The meeting ended with new protocols. Throck ordered his staff to update their threat assessment procedures to account for human persistence hunters. Not because humans were likely to cause trouble on his station, but because his security teams needed to understand what they were dealing with when they encountered one. Similar meetings were happening across the galaxy. Predator species that had ruled their worlds through strength and speed were learning an uncomfortable truth. They had competition, and that competition used a method they had never fully understood. On a Vaxian military training facility, instructors began teaching their students about persistence predators. They showed videos of ancient Earth, of humans tracking animals across vast distances, of prey collapsing from exhaustion while the hunters walked calmly behind them. "This is why humans do not wear heavy armor," one instructor explained to a class of young warriors. "They do not need it. Their hunting method relies on endurance, not protection. Armor would slow them down, make them tire faster. Instead, they wear light clothing that allows their bodies to cool efficiently. They carry minimal gear because every extra pound means more energy spent over long distances." A student raised her hand. "But we are faster than humans. We are stronger. How can they be a threat?" "Speed and strength matter in a sprint," the instructor replied. "But humans do not sprint. They pace, they track, they follow. And if you become their target, they will be there tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. Eventually your body will fail before theirs does." The lesson was uncomfortable for species that prided themselves on their combat prowess. But it was necessary. The galaxy was learning to respect a different kind of strength. Laura arrived back on Earth 3 weeks after leaving Bloodmark. She transferred Kane to the proper authorities, filed her reports, and returned to her small apartment in the city. The place was sparse, containing only the essentials. A bed, a table, a few chairs, and shelves filled with books about tracking and animal behavior. She was home for less than a day when her communication device chirped with a new message. Another assignment. Another human who had committed crimes and fled into the galaxy, thinking distance would protect them. Laura read the file carefully. The target was on an ice world called Frostheim, hiding among a colony of miners. It would be a challenging hunt, with cold temperatures and difficult terrain. But Laura had tracked people through worse conditions. She packed her simple bag, checked her supplies, and prepared to leave. As she stood at her apartment door, she paused to look at a photograph on the wall. It showed a group of people in research gear standing on an alien plane. Laura was among them, younger but with the same patient expression. That expedition had changed her life. 15 years studying predator behavior across dozens of worlds, learning how different species hunted and killed and survived. She had observed pack tactics, ambush strategies, and pursuit methods. She had documented everything with scientific precision. Then she had returned to Earth and found a new purpose. Using that knowledge to track down humans who thought they could escape justice by fleeing to the stars. Laura left her apartment and headed to the spaceport. The journey to Frostheim would take 2 weeks. The actual hunt might take months. But time did not matter to Laura. Time was her greatest weapon. On Bloodmark, the training facility had already incorporated Laura's pursuit into their curriculum. They showed the footage to every class, using it as an example of perfect persistence hunting. Victor Kane had become a cautionary tale, an example of what happened when you tried to outrun something that would never stop. The facility's director, a grizzled HRRN warrior named Grak, watched the footage again in his office. He had hunted on 17 worlds, had trained thousands of warriors, and had never been truly afraid of anything. Until he watched that human woman walk for 3 days without stopping, without hesitating, without showing a single moment of doubt. "We have been teaching the wrong lessons," Grak muttered to himself. "We teach our students to be faster, stronger, deadlier. But we never teach them about patience, about persistence, about the kind of hunter that wins not through power but through time." He made a note to develop new training modules. His students needed to understand that combat came in many forms, and the most dangerous opponent was not always the one with the biggest weapon or the thickest armor. Sometimes, the most dangerous opponent was the one who simply refused to quit. Laura's shuttle broke atmosphere, climbing toward the stars where her next target waited. She settled into her seat and pulled out a data pad, reviewing the information on her new assignment. The pattern was already forming in her mind, the trail becoming visible even before she started following it. Somewhere on Frostheim, a human criminal was about to learn the same lesson Victor Kane had learned. The same lesson that the galaxy's predators were learning through stories and footage and direct experience. You cannot outrun a human who has decided to follow you. You can be faster, you can be stronger, you can have better technology and more resources. None of it matters. Because humans will keep walking. They will track you through terrain that should be impossible. They will follow you across distances that should be prohibitive. They will do it without armor, without heavy weapons, without anything except the one advantage evolution gave them. The ability to never stop. The shuttle jumped to faster-than-light speeds, carrying Laura toward her next hunt. Behind her, across the galaxy, predator species were updating their threat assessments, revising their training programs, and teaching their young to recognize the signs of a persistence hunter. No armor. No sound. Just a steady, patient presence that never wavered and never quit. The galaxy had learned a new kind of respect for humanity. Not because humans were the strongest or the fastest or the most technologically advanced, but because they were the species that would never, ever give up. And every predator in the galaxy now recognized that truth on sight. Laura closed her eyes and allowed herself to rest. The hunt ahead would be long and difficult. But she had time. She always had time. Because that is what persistence hunters do. They endure. They outlast. They win not through dramatic confrontations, but through simple, relentless determination. The stars streamed past the viewing port, countless worlds where countless species lived and hunted and survived. Among them all, humans had found their place not through conquest or domination, but through a far more fundamental truth. They were the ones who never stopped walking.